So I'm sure many of you have heard of Venus Williams, who was the first black person to ever win a big tennis championship. However, while it might seem like a usual occurrence now, back then it was quite unusual, and people would judge black people as people who wouldn't normally play tennis. It might not just be because of their skin color, but maybe because at that time they weren't black people didn't weren't that financially stable, and maybe they wouldn't be able to afford to pay for coaching. And well, it also still happens now with people all around the world. And so today I'm going to be going deeper into that and talking about how to stop judging. And so firstly, what is judgment? So it's basically a constant mental activity that goes on inside our minds, and it distorts how we see things, and it can be a source of suffering. So maybe, for example, we judge ourselves as inferior to others, and that would make us have a belief in our mind that we always won't be good enough, and we won't, and other people will always be better. Yeah, but and the nature of judgment is basically that it's sometimes believed to be the a natural human thing to do, since we do it all the time. However, once we stop judging, we'll be able to see things with a much clearer lens, and yeah, be able to think more rationally. And people think that it's objective. However, it's actually just, yeah, like I said before, a projection that just distorts how we look at things. And yeah, we can judge anything from ourselves, others, and even objects. And yeah, so for example, we do it all the time as well. For example, if you go out on the street, you might see different people, and say for example, you see someone walking or talking differently. We judge what type of person they are just from that. And yeah, just and yeah, when I go to school, I also sometimes, when I get a new teacher who comes in, I also sometimes judge whether they'd be a good or a bad teacher, just as the teacher would judge whether we would be good or bad students. So yeah, it happens everywhere in the world. And so basically, the impact is that it basically just turns complicated realities into simple labels, and um, yeah, it like whether something is good or bad or right or wrong. And so, for example, maybe some people avoid someone at school, and they don't try to get close to that person. Well, at first glance, if we judge it just immediately, we might just perceive that the people who avoid that person might be bullies and bad people. However, if we actually look at a wider picture and don't immediately judge at first glance, we might see that the person has a history of making trouble. So yeah, it just we really need to look at things from a wider perspective instead of just focusing on a certain part of the story and without looking at the full picture. And yeah, once you are able to stop judging, you'll be able to see things much more clearly. And yeah, you'll also be able to understand other people more, since when we judge, we often like we don't listen to what other people are saying, and we filter their words through our assumption, and that affects our relationships, because we don't pay attention to the communication and connection that we hold with others. And yeah, and we basically just live in our own thoughts. And when we judge, once we have made that particular judgment, we always like pick out information that supports our judgments, and then any information that contradicts our judgment, we just ignore. So say for example, you believe that you're not good at the piano, um, well then every single time you make a mistake, or every single time you do badly in an exam, in a piano exam, that basically just serves as evidence for your judgment, in which you believe. However, even though sometimes you perform really well, and maybe you play a piece really well, it just like gets ignored by your judgment, and you just don't pay attention to it, and you only focus on the negative parts that that um, that increase the evidence based on your judgment. And so yeah, where does it come from? Well, it's basically just a tool that we use to protect ego, or it can just give us confirmation. So like with the thing, like the example where you might think you're not good at piano, um, even though even though it might be a wrong opinion, it still serves as confirmation for something that we're not too sure about, which is whether we're good or not at piano. And the evidence that we have just serves as further proof to confirm it, even though it might not be true. And yeah, that creates a separation and a sense of superiority or inferiority from ourselves and others. And so yeah, non-judgment. So now, what does non-judgment do? So I mean, it's not really aiming to get rid of all types of evaluation, but actually just is to aim to cultivate discernment instead of judgment. So the difference is that discernment comes from awareness, while on the other hand, judgment comes from just fear with a narrow lens. And with discernment, you will be able to see the bigger picture. So yeah, with the example of someone being avoided at school, discernment means looking at the big picture and seeing the reason as to why people would avoid that person. However, judgment would just be immediately making an opinion as soon as you see the situation, and just labeling the people who avoid that person as bullies or as bad people. And yeah, you'll be able to see things a lot more clearly and make decisions with rationality. And yeah, it also leads to clearer observations, as you have more clarity as well. And yeah, so it's like with the example of Venus Williams and Serena Williams. Basically, they were like the first. They were one. They were the first black tennis players who won championships, and so at first um, they were judged as maybe not being that good at tennis, since they don't have that much resources or money to support themselves, or maybe, and since like not many black there weren't that many black tennis players before. So yeah, however you shouldn't really just like judge people based on that without even seeing without looking at the full picture and seeing how they play. And yeah, once you are able to stop judging, you are able to let go, and it stops mental friction, and it opens space for acceptance, and yeah, as well as transforming relationships with yourself and other people. And so yeah, overall, the things you should take away are that firstly, judgment makes you see things through a narrow lens, and you just make decisions based on a small part of the story. Secondly, there's a difference between judgment and discernment, where discernment comes from awareness and judgment comes from fear. And then finally, once you let go, you'll be able to stop mental friction, and you'll be able to transform relationships with others, and open space for acceptance. Yeah, so um, hopefully you took something away from this talk. Maybe if you go out, next time and see different people, you might not. You keep this in mind and just not judge people immediately. Thank you for listening.